Alright, so you have your Knights Templar, and they're coming back to Europe, and they have all sorts of occult techniques under their belts, and they basically put themselves off as a really charitable, poor group. You know, their symbol is two men riding on one horse, meaning they didn't have enough money to have their own horse. But they were the first bankers. Anybody who wanted to go to Jerusalem basically gave them all their possessions en route to Jerusalem. And then when they came back from Jerusalem, so that they wouldn't be robbed on the way, they would pick up their possessions from the Templars, and there was a usury or interest charged. So the first bankers, they made a whole bunch of wealth, and they loaned that to the French king. Well, the French king, who was deeply indebted to them, monetarily speaking, and the corrupted Pope. This is after the 7th century. About the 7th century, the iconoclastic period happened. You see a Manita muscaria, the tree of knowledge, coming back into the Roman Church. You know that if the Pope is eating that, he's become like Pharaoh. His heart has deadened, and he's basically dictating to the people. He's not speaking as one who knows Christ. He's speaking as one who assumes to be Christ. A very big difference. Okay, so Manita muscaria, the Pope is corrupt. Here comes the King of France. They get together. They say, let's catch the head of the Knights Templar, Jacques Desmoulins, who himself was considered to be some people will call him a druggie, although I distinguish between a druggie and a person who uses psychedelics for religious purposes. And then, you know, there's the good camp and the bad camp. So we have to split some hairs here, but we got plenty of hair, so let's go forward with that. Okay, this French Pope, the King of France and the Pope, basically capture Jacques Desmoulins, and burn him at the stake. And they capture him on October 13th of the year 1307, right about there. And so that's where we get Friday the 13th, an unlucky day, because the Knights Templar, Jacques Desmoulins, their king, if you will, was captured and later burned at the stake. So what happened was an edict was put out to arrest all the Templars. The King of England was like, well, why would we want to do this? And so he took a year before he enforced it, and that gave all the Templars time to get their masses of wealth. They were basically the richest people in the world. Pile them onto ships and work as mercenaries up and down the coast of the Atlantic Ocean on the English side as opposed to the American side. But that brings up an important point. Because these guys had so much wealth and because they were sailing around, they later, and as mercenaries, they became what's known as the pirates. You've heard of the Pirates of the Caribbean. The reason that this is important is it's believed that these secret societies discovered the New World way ahead of us. And in fact, if you look into the history of Columbus, you'll find that it's really his history, who he was, is shrouded in mystery. And that could very well be because he was one of the members of the Templars, or perhaps the Scottish rite of Freemasonry, which evolved up in Scotland, and is believed to have been a big chunk of the Templars' wealth. We're talking a lot of gold, a lot of wealth. They not only got this from usury, but also from robbing temples and going through Jerusalem's ruins and finding treasures cached there. Okay, well, that brings us to the pirates, and the pirates remind you of what? Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is who's running our country. They are basically, well, they've bankrupted our country. They've got us involved in 2 wars, and they're working on a 3rd war, which will, the war with Iran, which will become the World War III. Because when we attack Iran, we're cutting off China from their oil supply. So China and Russia, as the plan is, will unite and attack capitalist America. So it's communism versus capitalism. These Illuminati, they work with Hegelian technique. They say, well, let's get some of our guys over here on the right and some of our guys over here on the left. We'll make the 2 fight. So what we need to do as people is we need to listen to the real issues, and we need to choose the right answer. Maybe sometimes it's the right and sometimes it's the left, but let's try to be centralized. Let's try not to be swayed over to these extremes, because they have people actively pitting the Democrats against the Republicans, the blue against the red, and because we're divided, we're conquered. So this is what they're up to, and by pitting the Third World War, capitalist versus communist, they want the outcome to be, which they've already anticipated, socialism. So they'll create a one-world socialist dictatorship where our wages and our monetary status are basically very reduced. Some of us will be looking forward to that by that time, but most of us will feel like, wow, this is they put me into the chains of some type of slavery, economic slavery. Not good. Recommendations: buy up silver. Not gold, because they've got the gold. They're going to flood the market when it reaches around 900 per ounce. But silver, that's like a baby swimming pool. If they jumped in with their hands, their two fists, it would raise the price through the roof. But you and I, we can go down to the dime store, the coin store, and buy up 55 pounds of silver junk coins, and we'll be able to buy groceries for the rest of, past 2012. Okay, so that brings us to Skull and Bones. These are the secret societies of the modern era. They're still working with drugs. You have drug trafficking, where the East Indies Company for Britain basically sold opium to the Chinese against their will. That caused the Chinese Opium Wars. Again, Skull and Bones was founded by a gentleman whose last name is Russell, and he basically took the money that he made from the East Indies Company selling opium to the Chinese and used it to invest in and create Yale University's secret society, Skull and Bones, who is tied directly into the Bavarian Mother Church, which was founded by Adam Weishaupt in 1776, in May 1st. So he was an ex-Jesuit priest. The Jesuits also are wrapped up in this. The Jesuits, we'll come back to Adam Weishaupt. The Jesuits were started by Ignatius Loyola, who had his leg nearly blown off by a cannonball, and he was, while he was convalescing and recovering, he went before the Pope at that time, and he was being brought in on witch trial charges that he was associated with the occult. So he went in crawling on his knees and came out with a palpable bull, which allowed him to do whatever he wanted. Nobody had the authority except for the Pope to arrest him, and he was to create basically a society which would do whatever the Pope wanted. They would be an extremely loyal, fanatical society, and that was Los Ilumbratos, or the Illuminated Ones. Later, the Pope had him change the name to the Society for Jesus, or the Jesuits. But they were pretty corrupt from the start. In fact, among the Jesuits, there's a secret that if you have any inclination that you don't agree with somebody when they're asking you some question,